Hey, everybody, welcome to the Talent and Strategy Show here on the Success is a Choice Podcasting Network. I'm your host, Jamy Bechler. And today we got a real fun episode, and we'll get to our guests in just a minute. But this episode is made possible by our friends over at Affinity Recruiting and Consulting. Learn how to advance your mission, improve your bottom line. Check them out at affinitytoday.com. Now, we're going to get to our guests in just a moment, but first we want to give you a little thought for the day as we get started here. The thought for the day: a year from now, you'll wish you started today. A year from now, you'll wish you started today. It's tough getting started. Sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot. We don't ever achieve our goals or get to where we want to go because we didn't even start. And so if we want to get to where we're going, then we got to start at some point. And so remember that a year from now, whether it's weight loss, whether it's a goal you have, whether it's what we're going to talk about today, starting a business, you can't ever get to a year from now or 2 years from now or 3 years from now if you didn't start today. So our guest today on the show, the president of consulting for Affinity Recruiting and Consulting, Ruston Pierce. He came on the show last week. So Ruston, appreciate you coming back for another week of the show. Thank you for that. And we also have Rob Murphy, the founder and CEO of Affinity Recruiting and Consulting. Rob is also a former athlete at the University of Tennessee, former basketball player. He's also a former basketball coach and athletic director. So Ruston was also a former coach, former headmaster, superintendent. So we're all former sports guys. We're all former educators. So welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're glad to have you, Rob. Ruston was here last week, so he's familiar with our audience, and our audience is familiar with him. But Rob, give us kind of a 30,000-foot view of who you are, what you do.
Sure. So, yeah, I really am, in essence, the kid who never figured out what he was doing what he wanted to do when he grew up. That is still me. I have, been out of college for about 10 years now, and my career track has been just completely unpredictable, wild, random. But God's been really good to me, and I've had years of athletic director work, and went to NASA for 6 months for a job that sounded really cool. And then it was just making sure that this one spreadsheet looked like this other spreadsheet for 8 hours a day. And then, I raised money at another Christian school, begged all the families for money, sold tennis shoes, and then started a recruiting company. So it's basically exactly how you would think that my career would have gone. But my wife and I have 2 kids. Ellie's 4, Jack is 1, and my wife is actually pregnant with our 3rd. So we're feeling blessed.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you being here. Great 30,000-foot view, great summary of kind of where you've been and where you're at now. We're going to dive into that here in just a few minutes with what you're doing now and what Affinity is doing. Ruston, give our viewers who weren't on the show last week or didn't see you, give kind of your elevator pitch of where you've been and where you're at now.
Yeah, so I've got over 20 years of experience in nonprofit administration. All of those things tied together to being able to come alongside Rob and adding the consulting side of Affinity. And it's just been an incredible blessing. We work with churches, schools, nonprofits, higher ed, just different organizations all over the country. And then we also offer outsourced human resources solutions, and that's for-profit or nonprofit. And that's opened a lot of doors for us as well, because one of the main things we want to do as a company is we want to come alongside and be a one-stop shop for the organizations we work with. So whether that's search or whether that's the back-end human resources, whatever it is, whether that's culture building within the organization, we want to be able to come alongside and help them shore up whatever weakness they have. And so, in order to do that, we have to be very involved in all the aspects of the organization. So we're blessed to get to do that. We love it. And it's what we do every day.
And if you want to know more about what Ruston does, we went pretty much a whole episode last week talking about some of the various things that he does with the company. So check that out on the Success is a Choice Podcasting Network. But today Ruston is going to kind of play co-host a little bit with myself, and we're going to be asking Rob some questions and kind of getting at the heart of not only what Affinity does and what Rob does for Affinity, but just where Affinity came from, and more to the point, if you're thinking about starting a business, if you're thinking about starting something, we talked about it. The thought for the day was a year from now, you'll wish you started today. Well, if you'd like to own your own business one day, or you'd like to start something and make something great, we're going to be talking about that a little bit. So, Rob, I want to come back to you. What's been kind of the hardest part of starting this company? You have all this experience, you've done all these things, you're pretty versatile. You're multidimensional. You're a 5-tool player. But what was the hardest part about starting a business from scratch?
Well, first of all, you'd have to argue with my middle school baseball coach that I'm a 5-tool player because I wore jorts to tryouts and got cut. But I appreciate that very much. The hardest thing for me about starting a business is the unknown. You don't really understand until you get started how much you don't know. It's really just completely different than doing anything else. And that's why, for me, when I got started, I believe that anyone who's starting any kind of business effort, it's an absolute requirement to get a consultant, a guide, a business coach, and someone who's done exactly what you're trying to do. And honestly, that's not just a plug for people should use Ruston for consulting to do the things they're trying to accomplish, although it's true. But for me, and of course I compounded that by starting a business in an industry that I didn't know a single thing about. So I wouldn't recommend that to anyone else, but you can do that if you want to. But yeah, I think that the unknown and just finding that balance between getting your processes as clean and smooth as possible versus actually doing them, right? So, I think early on for me, I spent way too much time trying to perfect my sales process and my outbound calls and my email strategy and stuff. It's like, no, it's good to make sure I'm not wasting tons of time and I'm being efficient, but I've also got to do it. Nobody's coming to me. Nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows what I do. If I don't get out there and start talking to people, nothing's going to happen. So I think that the unknown and finding that balance between strategy and action is probably the hardest part.
Jamy, you started Success as a Choice from zero startup, just like Rob did with Affinity. I would ask you the same question. What do you think is the hardest part of starting a new company or a new business? What did you run into?
Yeah, certainly. I would say for me was I went from all these years, like most people, of having a boss, of going either into an office or having certain responsibilities, and then all of a sudden you're thrust as an entrepreneur where you're your own boss, you're also your own employee, and you don't answer to anybody. But on the other hand, you get to decide which 100 hours during the week you're going to work. You have complete flexibility to work 100 hours at your choosing. But probably the biggest thing for me was jumping into this. When you go out and speak and when you write books and all that, the content part of it, I felt like I had a pretty good grasp on the leadership side of it in terms of content producing. The business side of it was more challenging. You look at someone that's up on stage speaking, entertaining, someone that's going and doing workshops. That's kind of easy compared to actually running your own business. And what I mean by that is, well, what happens when COVID hits and things get shut down? How many different revenue streams do you have? Hey, you no longer have a 401k. You no longer have insurance. Hey, yeah, you might make a lot on this speech or make a lot on this workshop, but you're not doing that every day. Sure. Or for me in my space, in my business, August and September are my two biggest months. That's when schools are starting. That's when teams are starting. And so they all want to start fresh. They all want to kick it off on a high note. Well, November and December aren't as good. And so if I spend in November and December, if I have these expenses the same as I did in August and September, I'm going to run out of money. So you also have to budget that. You have to figure out what are you going to do when there's a dry spell. And, there's three major areas: marketing, yourself, getting your brand out there, promoting yourself so people know who you are. Rob talked about that. People have to know who you are. Well, people have to know my content, but then producing content and then the sales side, the business side, how you make money. All three of those things are three separate entities. And so I wasn't quite ready for, hey, Jamie's got to juggle all three of those balls. And if one of them drops, we're in trouble because no one's there to pick up the slack. It's just me. And so I don't have necessarily a team around me that's going to pick up the slack. So if I get sick or if there's a death in the family or my son gets sick, all those kinds of things. And so that's was probably the biggest challenge, was how to juggle all those balls. I'm pretty good at juggling, but realizing that, if I didn't make money today, or if I didn't get a contract today, then somewhere down the line, I'm also not going to have money. That paycheck doesn't just come every Friday, whether I'm good or not. And so just the whole business side of it, it looks cool. It looks, wow, you write books or you do a podcast or you speak. It looks cool, but there's that back end stuff sometimes where it's like, ooh, there's a lot more to this. And my first couple of years was almost as a grad assistant. It took me back to my college coaching days when I'm a grad assistant because I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I'm just trying to learn different things. And, with that, Rob, what are some things that you wish you could go back a couple of years and tell your younger self? What are some things when you were looking at this startup that you wish you knew then, what you know now?
Yeah, I think self-awareness is such a crucial piece because, as you said, when you have nobody to pick up the slack for you or to cover for your weaknesses are going to be on display equally as your strengths are. For me, coming out of church and school world, as y'all both well know, decisions take forever. And I was so just honestly bitter about that I came into this doing my own thing, like you said, being my own boss. I got a high off of like, hey, this decision that would take a year at a church or a school, I can make that decision tonight. And I was so reckless in so many of the choices that I made, even to the point that my business coach like yelled at me, might have cussed at me, but I'll leave that up to him to determine what exactly he said. But because we would have our weekly calls, and I just told him, one Wednesday about something I'd done. He was like, "What are you doing? Just doing that without talking to anyone, dude? Like, you just did that? Like, healthy organization take a month or two to think about that. Now, 6 months is too long, but you also can't be doing stuff like that overnight, And so my weaknesses, that's one that certainly comes to mind. But self-awareness, I would say, is the number one thing I wish that I had taught myself earlier.
Jamie, sort of along the same lines, if you could go back, and you kind of hit on it a little bit when you were talking a second ago, but if you could go back and redo anything that you did initially, what are the things that you would absolutely redo if you had the chance?
Yeah, probably the one thing that I think of right away is I tried to be all things to all people. I tried to, I'm this leadership guy, so I can go speak about leadership to everybody. And that might be true, but I spent a long time trying to get in front of, the dental association, trying to get in front of the sheriff's association. I'm just throwing things out there. Like I would go anywhere that would pay me any kind of money. And I felt like I could help anybody. And though that might be true, what I wasn't doing is I wasn't looking at where do I want to end up 5 years from now. And I wasn't doing things necessarily to put myself in a position to take advantage of opportunities. And so I really think niching down, and that's really hard for people. So you could even say, all right, sports leadership. Well, you just focus on sports. Well, that's a lot. Well, you're going to focus on pro, you're going to focus on college, you're going to focus on high school. And then even within that, are you focusing on college softball? Are you focusing on college lacrosse? The more you can niche down, I think the better off I would have been early on. And that doesn't mean you don't take other things that come your way if it's in your wheelhouse or if you feel like it brings value to them and you in your business. But like for instance, right now, I don't market, I don't spend a single dollar speaking to banks, but I've had a number of banks reach out to me, and then I'll go speak to them or I'll do workshops with them if it fits into my schedule and I feel like I can add value. But I don't purposely, intentionally seek those out because I'm limited with my time and limited with my money. And early on, like if I had a chance to go speak for any amount of money, I would go do it because that would pay the bills. Well, I would have rather not paid a bill, or I would have rather not taken a little bit of money and had that full day instead of traveling, have that full day to be writing content, be putting strategic plans together and getting a strategy. Because early on, what I was doing was just treading water. I was just treading water every day because all of a sudden my paycheck's in. All of a sudden, everything relies on me. And so I'm treading water, just trying to survive, as opposed to, all right, I started this business. I should be planning out ahead. And I know you guys do a lot with strategic planning, especially with schools and nonprofits. That's so important because otherwise you just get on that treadmill and you don't end up going anywhere. And that was one of my biggest mistakes early on is I really didn't get anywhere. I was just treading water.
Yeah.
Yeah, survival mode hits hard in the early days of a startup. Particularly in your case, Jamie, and for me as well. I mean, our business was funded by a second mortgage on my house. My wife doesn't work outside the home. We got 2 little kids. I mean, survival mode hits hard, and it's hard to get out of that. And I've had people tell me from the very beginning that I have to niche down, especially on the recruiting side, that, we need to focus on a specific industry, specific types of jobs. Honestly, and we still haven't done it. I mean, consulting, even though the consulting part of our business is, has been around for less time, and the HR outsourcing portion of our business has been around for a lot less time. Both of those are niched down already much better than the recruiting side really has been and still is. And, honestly, just to be transparent, I mean, we're still, we're about 3 years in right now, almost 3, and we still are at a point where now most of our business is repeat customers, but at the same time, it's widespread across a variety of industries and types of jobs. And, I've kind of fought back against niching somewhat because we have great clients in different areas, although I know it's the right thing to do. So it's another thing, you talk about challenges of small business, figuring that out is tough. And then you go from survival of my family to survival of the business. And we've got 8 or 10 people that need to make money. And so it's hard to find that balance.
Rob, do you ever feel like you get to a place where Affinity has arrived? And Jamie, same question to you after he gets done.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I've thought about that myself, what that means. Honestly, I hate to say it, but I think we have arrived just because God's been good to us and everybody's getting paid and we're all here, we exist. And I think that people who've never run a business, it's just easy. I know I did before I did this. I just took so much for granted. Jamie, you talked about the security of a paycheck every other Friday and benefits and all that stuff. And, that doesn't mirror the actual business world at all. Real life business and, that to include schools, colleges, churches, nonprofits, real life doesn't bring consistency when it comes to who's actually writing checks, and those things hit you hard. And I think that's the number one thing that we take for granted when we're not in charge of a business or an organization of any kind is just, hey, frankly, I absorb as the person whose debt finances things, especially when times are hard. Frankly, I absorb all of that inconsistency, and it's my job to do that because the people that work with us, they need to get paid and they need to get paid on time. And, we have clients. That's one of the things that hit me hard early too, is people don't do what they say they're going to do. People that are 90 days late with their check, that stuff just freaking kills you, especially when you're small. So yeah, I'll let you take a turn there, Jamie.
Jamie, what does the Jamy Bechler Leadership Success is a Choice Monster Network, when has it arrived?
Never. Now there might be times when I'm like, gosh, I achieved a goal, or that feels so good, or hey, this person wanted me to come speak at their conference, and this was a bucket list thing. But you've got to constantly be setting new goals. What now can I do? And Rob, you talked about, like, you started your company, it was just you right away. Well, now you have team members. Well, now you have to reevaluate your goals because you have team members. Well, maybe your thought was, man, once I can get 3 or 4 team members, I've arrived. We're big time. And then you get 8 to 10, and it's like, okay, well, we're even bigger time. But then it's like, okay, well, we've got these team members, but now our revenue needs to increase, or else we'll go back to 3 or 4 team members, or 2 or 3 team members. And so you're constantly doing that. And I don't think, we were all coaches. We win a game. That's awesome. We're excited about that. We can be satisfied about that outcome, but we have another game to prepare for. We have kids on our roster, on our bench, that still have to get better. They haven't reached their individual goals, let's say. You're constantly trying to get better. You can always be improving, and being an entrepreneur, having your own business, having a startup is no different. It's not about, all right, well, you've reached the 50K follower count in Twitter, or the 100K, or you've now been verified on Twitter, or, hey, this retweet, I finally got 1,000 on that, or I've got 200 whatever on Facebook. Or it's not about social media. You can always do better. Or, hey, I know people that have 200, 300, 400 followers on Twitter, let's say, and they get like crickets on all their posts. They get 3 or 4 retweets on their posts. Well, they're not adding value. Either they have a bunch of robots, a bunch of bots that follow them, or all of their followers don't think that they're adding value. So there's always something more you can do. Let's say you have a big followership, or let's say you're getting on stage, you're speaking. Well, that's great. But now, are you adding value to those people? Like, are you actually giving them something that's valuable and benefits them? So there's always things you can do to get better. No, I don't think I'll ever have arrived. I thought about that the other day. I was like, man, if I won the lotto, maybe I'd be like, okay, I'm financially secure where I can take more risk in my business. But then I'm like, well, would I really actually take more risk than I'm doing now? Probably not. I would probably be doing some of the same stuff I'm doing now. It's just my wife wouldn't have to work, or we would be able to take more vacations, or I'd be able to hire more staff. So yeah, I don't think you've ever arrived. You just take it to another level.
Yeah. My high school
Powerball's up in the hundreds of millions. I've got a retirement plan there.
My basketball coach in high school, one of his little sayings that has always stuck with me is that you're either getting better or you're getting worse. Nobody's staying the same. And, and I say that we've arrived, but I just say that just because I feel blessed that we still exist and that people are getting paid. In the other sense, we very much have not arrived and never will, just like you said. I think that one of the things that my business coach, Bradley Hamner, he'll always remind me to think about is the gap in the gain. So that's another thing that's difficult to be disciplined about, is to simultaneously spend time thinking about how far you want to go, but also taking a moment to think about, here's how far we've come, right? Like, let's look back and be thankful that we're not where we were 2 years ago. And then let's talk about, what do we want 2027 to look like?
Yeah, that's a great point. And you also made another great point, Rob, with the arriving thing. It's also definitional. How do you measure arriving? Because have you arrived? Like, are you an established company? Or maybe I've arrived when I become an LLC, or I've arrived when I reach a certain, you've arrived, but we've all arrived at a game before. Well, did we actually show up and perform and win that game? Like, we arrived. So there's different definitions about that, but are you achieving the goals? I would say your company Affinity has arrived because you're established, you're an actual company. You've stayed in business for a number of years here. You have team members, you've arrived. Now, are you continuing to grow, whatever that looks like?
Right. No, absolutely. And, for us too, like, one of the things I have to caution myself about as well is, bigger is not better. Bigger doesn't equal better. Now, there are a lot of organizations that is one of their critical goals, is to get bigger. That's really not for us. I think that, we don't have a goal of growing to 30 or 50 people. I mean, our goals involve increased financial security. Let's put more cash in the bank. I mean, there's companies that have incredible runs for 10, 20 years and are, making money hand over fist, flush with cash, and then the whole thing goes under. And, some of my mentors who've run businesses for longer than I have say that, hey, the habits that you have now are going to carry over to when you're bigger. If you manage cash poorly now, then, if your revenue goes from $1 million to 10 million, well, you're still going to manage cash poorly if you don't fix that problem. And all of your positive and negative moments are just going to be magnified by a factor of 10. So, the excitement of going from 1 to 10 million, yeah, that's awesome. But then also when your team is that size, well, you got a big payroll. And if you're not month over month being consistent and staying on top of your P's and Q's, well, that's a huge hole to dig out of. That payroll number is just scarier. So, and things change all the time, like we've talked about. I mean, how many restaurants were absolutely dominating for 20 years and then COVID hit? I mean, you have no idea what's going to happen.
Well, and as you grow and as you get more team members and stuff, it's important that you have good HR, outsourced HR, which Affinity can do for your company. So, hey, we're gonna get right back to Ruston and Rob in just a moment. But first, I want to talk a little bit to the coaches, to the ADs out there, talk about some of the coaching challenges and the great things about coaching that you guys run into. So we're going to talk just a minute. We're going to have a little video here from the leadershipplaybook.com. They're one of our partners at the Success is a Choice podcast. So we're going to take a brief break and then get back to Ruston.
Hey, Coach, do you find yourself banging your head against the wall trying to get your athletes to do the right things? Well, it can be frustrating when our athletes don't train properly, have commitment issues, or display bad attitudes. We've probably experienced times when our athletes all seem to be going in a million different directions, or when they've struggled to pay attention when we're trying to coach them. How about those times when they lose their composure over a referee's call, or they get distracted by things outside of their control? Sometimes we have athletes that underperform in the classroom, or those who make poor choices away from the playing field, which affect their athletic performance, or even their life. Well, coaching sure can be challenging sometimes, but it's so worth it. You are one of the most influential people in an athlete's life. You get to help them develop as athletes and future leaders. And when your athletes learn to be better teammates and more positive leaders, your culture becomes stronger, and your players maximize their chances for success.
Watch that. If you're listening to this on the audio version, you would have missed out on the little fun, little silly cartoon that we just had there. But the leadershipplaybook.com, better teammates, more positive leaders, stronger cultures, the leadershipplaybook.com. If you're a coach, if you're an AD, go ahead and check that out to build a stronger culture. But Ruston, Rob, want to get back to you guys. But as you look at startups, and we'll start with Rob, but Ruston, if you have anything to add, when you look at starting things up, a startup company, let's say, where do you think, like, what are the we've talked about the challenges of the startup, but what are the benefits of it? I think we all know why you would rather be in a startup, or why you would rather work for yourself or be a self-owned business. But what for you, Rob, has been a benefit of that? And Ruston, being on the outside, you don't actually, you've worked in schooling for a long time, where you had a board of directors or that kind of stuff. And now you have a lot of flexibility working with Affinity. You can talk about that, the flexibility, in just a minute. But Rob, what have been some of the biggest benefits to you personally, maybe to your family?
Absolutely. I would say, honestly, the number one benefit has been that I've grown so much in my faith and in my walk with Christ, just because, he's really used our company in my life, my family's life, to draw us to a place of leaning more on him, frankly. And our faith is so much stronger now than it was 2.5 years ago, just because, and honestly, that was, we weren't going to do this unless the Lord really put it strongly on our heart, and he did. And he's just used it in such powerful ways for our faith to grow and for us to trust in him, and just to see all the ways in which he's worked and helped us to just improve as people. That's been, frankly, the number one benefit for me. And of course, absolutely, the flexibility that everybody thinks about and talks about, it is absolutely true. And I was very fortunate, within just a few weeks of starting up, Taylor Baggett, my business partner, joined on, and he had been an entrepreneur for over a decade. He started actually a restaurant that when COVID came around, he shut it down, and he kind of saw the writing on the wall and just said, hey, we're going to pay everybody, for another month, but we're shutting this thing down, give everybody a little bit of runway to find what's next. We're not going to fight the COVID battle. And so he was looking for his next thing. We had a mutual friend who introduced us. And so from the early days for me, I have been blessed with the ability to spend more time with family. It's pretty wild as well, when you talk about startups and the business world, but I have never probably worked more than 40 hours a week on it. And I have maintained my coaching job. I still coach high school basketball. That hasn't been paused at any point. My standard day is that I work from about 8:15 in the morning after I drop my daughter off till 2:30, and then I go to the gym, and then I'm with the kids until 5. I go home. I'm with the family for the night. In the early days, there was more nights when I had to pull back up the laptop after dinner or after the kids were down. But that's a lot less these days. And, the great thing about the independence of small business is that if you can get the job done in any amount of time, if you can be hyper productive for 6-8 hours, then it works. I mean, the only thing that matters is whether it gets done or not. And so that has been great for our family.
Yeah, I would add on to that. I'm kind of the poster child for virtual work. I'm a firm believer that virtual full time isn't really full time, and so I think high capacity people who have the ability to script their schedules well and can stay on a schedule can get a lot done in a very short period of time. So even though on Affinity's side we are doing very well and have a lot of things happening, in spite of that, I was actually approached about being on the national leadership team for 7-Star, which is an online course provider. And so I've been serving under them for over a year now, a little over a year now. And that company just got purchased by ACSI. So as of a few weeks ago, I'm now an employee of ACSI. But again, it's all virtual. So if you can script it out.
Ruston, you never told me this. I'm just kidding. You did.
Worst kept secret on the face of the earth. If you can script it out and you can manage your day, just like Rob just said, I can get a lot done in a short period of time, and I can be really effective for both organizations and get the benefit of, working for multiple organizations and the things that come with that. But at the same time, still have that family freedom. I don't typically work past 3:00. It's rare. If I do, it's because I've got a meeting with somebody in a West Coast time zone. And they don't have any awareness of Eastern time. They just schedule stuff whenever. Funny story. I was on a call with a group in California. I was coaching my daughter's softball game, and no offense to this group, but I knew the call was going to be pointless. So I put my earbud in. I went and coached third base during the softball game. I muted it and sat in the meeting through the whole game. And at one point I had to unmute and answer something while I was coaching third base, and then I just muted it again. And the other team's coach looked at me and went, "Who are you just talking to?" And I said, "Oh, I'm in a meeting." and like it caught them off guard, and then they realized I had the Bluetooth in. They were like, "You're really in a meeting right now?" I'm like, "Yeah." But that's just the world we live in now, and that's the flexibility we have. And that group had no idea that I was coaching softball through that whole meeting.
Well, I feel a little bad now listening to both of you speak, because I put in way too many hours. So I need you to speak to me and help me, but also help all those other people out there, because as somebody looks at starting up a business, being an entrepreneur, I joked earlier, being an entrepreneur or starting your own business means you get to decide which 100 hours you're going to work in a week. Well, it doesn't sound like you guys relate to that, but other people might have the same problem as I do, and you're maybe not as efficient as you guys. So Rob, I'll start with you. Help me, but also help the other people listening to this that might want to start something up. How can they be more efficient? So it's not necessarily the hours you're putting in, but what you're putting into the hours, to use a cliche. Help us be efficient as we start a business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say there's a couple things. I mean, it all starts with eliminating waste and inefficiency. And so, to go back to one of my first points, you got to have a coach, you got to have an advisor. You can't do it by yourself. Don't do it by yourself. You need to find somebody who's walked the exact path that you're walking and been successful, and have them tell you what to do. And if you have to pay them for that, then great, do it. You should, because it's an investment that will pay off 100-fold over time. Secondly, and this is not as shameless of a plug for HR outsourcing as it might seem, outsource the stuff you can outsource. And I go back to self-awareness. You got to figure out, what are you good at and what are you bad at? Because there's things you're bad at. So pay somebody else to do those things. And, I know so many small business owners and solo entrepreneurs who labor over a flyer for 3 days. It's like, okay, get on Fiverr and pay somebody in Pakistan $11, and they'll do it in 3 hours. Like, you've got to find out how to get other people to do the things you're not good at. And everything can be outsourced. You can have somebody run your QuickBooks cheaply. You can have somebody create copy for you, even if it's just a rough draft. You can have people who, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is own your calendar. Your calendar is your calendar, and stick to it. I calendar literally everything. I calendar when I'm going to mow the grass. I calendar all my kids' games. I calendar when I'm going to have time to sit and just work on stuff at my laptop, and I block that out. Literally everything I do, if possible, is in my calendar, so that I can make sure I can see where the gaps are, where I'm falling short. I can see what I'm putting priority to and what I'm not. I can't. That was a lesson I had to learn the hard way. You were talking about early in a startup wanting to make fast decisions and do. I'm a driver. I'm a very driven person. I like to get things done. I like to move. And my personality, I have to dial myself back, or I will do what Rob was saying, and I'll just say yes to everything and go. Being accountable to your calendar can help you slow yourself down and make sure you're putting priority in the right areas.
Well, we probably skip some steps here, because maybe someone's wanting to start a business. We talked about how they can be more efficient. I love the stuff that you guys both said, but Rob, what would be your advice for someone wanting to start a business? Like, what is the first step? What should they do other than, head to Google, Google how to start a business. But other than that, what are some practical steps you would give people to start their own business?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a believer, you definitely need to spend time in prayer about it. And you need to spend time with your wife, if you're married, talking about it. And you need to make sure that, for me, we had to make sure that it was what God had for us. And you have to make sure that your spouse is on board with it. I would start by saying, don't be the guy who gains the whole world or gains a startup and loses your soul. You have to make it work for your family, because in 50 years, businesses come and go, jobs come and go, but your kids only have one childhood. and your spouse, hopefully you only have one, or if you're on a second or third, then hopefully that's the one you're going to stick with the rest of the way. And you need to make it work, because God's going to provide for you financially. He promises to do that. And so whatever you're going to do with your career, you have to make sure that you never put it ahead of your family. That's the number one thing. That's the saddest thing I've seen overall, is people who put everything into work and get obsessed with it. And it's just like, it's just not as important. It just isn't. And so my other piece of advice would just be, I've already talked about having a mentor, but, there's a lot of big decisions to make about what you're going to do. Are you going to start part-time and see if you can generate some interest while you keep your day job? Are you going to quit and go all in? Are you currently unemployed? You're going to go all in. How are you going to finance it? Just two nuggets that I would say for anyone thinking about starting a business. It's always a little harder than you think. The money always comes about 3 months after you think it's going to. And your network is not as good as you think it is. That's something that a mentor said to me, which has been so true. Your network is never as good as you think when you're starting something new. And you also, people do what they say they're going to do on average about 25% of the time. And you need to factor that in, because when I was getting started at the beginning, I wanted to go in business, and this is, again, advice that I got from somebody else. You can't go in business to go serve people who verbally said that they will use your services, because they're not going to. If it's not in writing and signed that they are committed to give you a shot, then you can't count on that happening. So you need to get signed contracts in advance, especially if you're going to go full steam ahead into something. You need to have people committed in writing to pay you money before you get started, because it'll smack you in the face if you think that the people who said they're interested are actually going to be your customers, because they're not.
Yeah, and that whole financial piece, we certainly don't want to dwell on money, but that can lead to a lot of issues. I think it's Dave Ramsey, or a lot of people talk about money is one of the number one causes of divorce. But when you don't have money, or you're struggling, or you have higher expectations, or like you said, the money comes in 3 months later. Well, why is that big of a deal? Well, it can also add stress to you, but it also can make you do things that you didn't want to do. You start knee-jerk reacting. You start taking shortcuts, or you start doing things, or you take speaking gigs, or you start doing things, or you be overly pushy in some of your sales, and you ruin relationships because you're overly pushy. There's a lot of things that not having money, or not being good with money, or not planning things out, having a good strategic plan, can ultimately hurt your business. It's not necessarily the money just so your bank account's bigger, but it can lead you to do things that you shouldn't be doing.
Absolutely.
Jamy, I have a quick question for both you and Rob. How often do you all think about ways to improve your company, and what does that thought process kind of tangibly look like?
Yeah, I'm always thinking. I have a curse. One of my strengths is also one of my weaknesses, in that I think all the time. I overthink. That's my problem. Is I think of all these different angles, which can be good, but I also overthink. And so, I'm constantly playing chess and not checkers, so to speak, but I'm thinking so many moves ahead. Most of the time, those moves don't even come true. Most of the time, what I just need to do is just move that one little space, just play checkers. So I tend to overthink a lot. So I'm always thinking about how I can do better in the business. And so I come up with too many ideas, and they're not executable. And so then I find myself having to backtrack, and now I have to prioritize. I have to figure out what is the most important thing I have to do right now. And so I've got to stick to that. And so I overthink, which leads to too many ideas. What's my mission? What am I trying to do? What I have to go back to. All right, am I trying to add value to this group, to this audience? And if so, what's the best way to do that? And it might be, I'm not going to take this speaking gig, or I want to write another book and I want to get it out right away. but you know what? It can wait. It's not the most important thing I need to do right now. And so you really have to honestly assess those things and realize your time. All right. You look at it and you say, all right, well, all right, I have this next month available. Well, maybe the next month is not good. Maybe you know you're going to be traveling a lot, especially during the holidays. That might be a time when you could say, all right, I can get a lot done because I don't have a lot of work. But it also could work the other way. And you could say, all right, I know I'm going to be traveling a lot and there's going to be a lot of family time. So I have a lot of free time, but actually it's going to get filled with family stuff. And so that's actually not a good time for me. So you have to know yourself, and it could work both ways.
Rob, what about you? How often do you think about ways to improve Affinity, and what does that thought process look like?
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite of Jamie with that, because my biggest weakness is I don't ever really want to think about the big picture. I just want to knock out the next thing on the to-do list. I'm more of a people pleaser than I should be. And, I think that works itself out in a good way for our clients a lot of the time, but especially the ones that I'm directly serving. But I have to really discipline myself to step back from the day to day and never really think about the big picture. I do meet with Bradley, my coach. We have calls every Wednesday, and then we meet once a month. And so that's one of the things that I have to do to be disciplined about stepping back and looking at the big picture. Because I don't like it. I really don't like it. And, one of the things that has kind of soured me or made me cynical about long-term planning is from the beginning, at the very beginning of Affinity, I made projections and stuff that, of course, didn't happen. And so to me, I've kind of gotten jaded about projections and long-term planning in general. And I feel like, hey, I need to be spending my time just landing the next client, delivering for that client, and so I have to do better personally with putting more value into the vision and the plan and the long-term strategy. Because, hey, now, 2.5 years later, got infinitely more data than I did when I was just a dummy who started a business in an area I didn't know anything about.
Real quickly, define long-term. How far out do you consider long-term?
3 years is kind of as far as I try to go. I mean, I think, if we were Dave Ramsey and we had a 10-year, 10X plan, then that's great. But, I'm not really quite on Dave's level. I'll settle for having a decent 3-year plan and even a plan for the upcoming quarter.
Yeah, when I do a strategic plan with somebody, I never go past 3 years. I think the rate of change in society is too strong. I just don't see how you can project past 3 years.
Yeah.
Well, and something Rob didn't necessarily specifically hit upon it, but he talked about how he gets into looking at kind of the day to day. He knows he should be doing longer term plans in a way. He's tried that in the past. It didn't necessarily work out the way he wanted it or the way he envisioned, but he knows he needs to do it. And I'm probably not doing a good job of recapping that or summarizing it. But one of the things we do as people about everything, it seems like, is we make everything an extreme. So, Well, I'm either a long-term planner or I'm not. Well, I'm either trying to make sales today or I'm not. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And I hate to be like Goldilocks. We have to have things just right. But there is a lot of balancing you have to do as a business owner or as an entrepreneur or just in life in general. There's a balance and you need to figure it out. And it may not always, I actually shouldn't even say balance, because it's not always going to be balanced out. Some months or some periods, it's not going to be balanced, but you have to align that with whatever your vision is, your values are. And so, yeah, Rob should do long-term planning, but maybe right now he needs to really focus on making some sales for this month or this time period or this quarter. Well, maybe he gets a handle on it and he has a time period or a couple of weeks where, I'm going to really need to dive in deep to this long-term plan.
Yeah.
So it's not always one or the other. And sometimes it's just, I'm going to spend a few hours a day working on this. I'm going to spend a few hours a day working on this over here. So it doesn't have to be I'm a planner or not a planner. Everybody needs to plan. It's just a matter of extremes. It's where is it on that continuum, and where is it in your business life cycle, your personal life. For instance, I mentioned earlier, August and September, I spent more time in a hotel room than I did in my own bedroom. Well, that's not the time to plan. that's the time I got to dig down. I'm not thinking about planning. I'm thinking about just surviving from one city, one school, one airport to the next, keeping track of where I'm at, making sure I get on the right plane. I'm not thinking about planning. Well, in November, December, for me, it slows down a lot. Well, now I'm going to start thinking about planning. So it might just be different time periods in your life or different months that you devote stuff to.
Yeah, there's always seasons in life and in business for sure.
Well, let's get into this. This kind of goes into what we talked about all day today, but it's our quote of the day. We're going to end with this, and you guys, you could probably relate to this in some way. But the quote that I have is from Zig Ziglar, the famous business coach, the famous motivational speaker. But he said, "You don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great." When Rob formed his business, he wasn't great. He wasn't this big time business person, but he had to start in order to be a big time business person. As an athlete, we all were athletes. We didn't start off, we didn't pop out of the womb and we're all of a sudden this great athlete, but we had to start somewhere. And so you don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great. Have you guys seen this at some point lived out in your lives, whether it's personally or professionally?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and yeah, as you said, I think the business is a great example of that. I was stumbling around in the darkness for a while, and by every measure, I look back at my original business plan and projections, and the way I was doing things, it's laughable today. But as you said, if we didn't take that shot, we wouldn't have started with anything. And now we've been very fortunate. We have incredible people on the team, and of course, we're working to improve every day, but we're very thankful to have an incredible team now.
I see this play out every single day. Like I said, I'm a driver. I like to get things done. The issue with drivers is when we're not getting things done or when we're under stress, we just stop altogether and we procrastinate and we put off. That's the personality trait. And so, for me, on the days when I'm not feeling it, when I'm not feeling like I'm productive and I don't want to do it, just getting started doing it can be a huge accomplishment.
Well, we'll get you guys out on this. Probably we probably should have talked about this right at the start, but this is one of the most important things we could probably talk about. I understand that there's a big game tomorrow. There's a rumor has it that there's a big game, at least in the South. I don't think anyone else in the nation cares about it, maybe. But
we could have spent the entire day talking about this, and you could have just participated when you felt like it.
Alabama, Tennessee. Evidently, they're both pretty good. And when I say they're both pretty good, I mean Tennessee actually is pretty good this year, which is a shock to everybody. But yeah, Tennessee, Alabama. Do we have any logical predictions from you guys other than being Tennessee homers, and you're going to say Tennessee will win?
My only logical prediction, which borders on the illogical, is that I will be in my vehicle at 4:00 a.m. and may go back live again just to test and see if there's any insomniacs out there. I plan to have 0 listeners, but I am going to be headed to General Neyland's Big Old House of Football, and I'm going to be yelling at the Tide. That's really the only thing I can predict with any accuracy.
I'm going to call my shot. I think Bryce Young tries to play, gets injured in the first quarter. Jalen Milroe comes in, has a huge blown play in the fourth quarter because he's a true freshman, and it leads to a Vol field goal to win 38-35.
If that is the case, y'all may never see me again along with the other people in Neyland Stadium, but time will tell.
Well, we have it on record. I know another guarantee is that if you follow Ruston on social media, he will probably have at least one thing about Tennessee, definitely about the referees. There will probably be one bad call at some point. But
it's
guys,
the SEC. They don't pay enough.
It's the SEC. They don't pay enough. I'm not sure that statement has been uttered many times before. But Tennessee, Alabama football tomorrow. Every Saturday, it seems like it's big time for the SEC, but this is a big one if you're a Tennessee fan, which these two gentlemen are. So Ruston Pierce, Rob Murphy, we really appreciate you guys being on the show. Thank you so much for that. Next week, we will be back here again Friday at 11 Eastern time for the live show on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And hey, related, this could have been the quote of the day as well, but related to that, remember that a journey of 1,000 miles, so says the old Chinese proverb, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with just a single step. So it doesn't matter what your goals are or what you want to accomplish in life. You just need to start. You just need to take a single step, or you will never get closer to achieving that goal, no matter what it is. So until next time, remember, success is a choice. What choice will you make today?